Hey there, ProChurch Media community, this is Jason. I think this is going to be a really fun tutorial. We're going to be looking at how to create liquid particles. Basically to create particles or shapes, or whatever you want to call them, that have this nice natural looking viscosity, how the particles flow in and out of each other, almost like water droplets, or something like that. It's not terribly difficult to pull off as long as you know what you're doing, so let's take a look at how we can know what we're doing. Alright, so for this tutorial we're going to be using a built-in After Effects effect called CC Particle World. It's basically a particle generation system, and it works pretty well. It's not the most flexible or intuitive thing, but it is free, so it has that going for it. And we're going to make it work just fine. However, if you are looking to do more with particles and have more flexibility and power, I have a couple different options for you that I highly recommend. The first is Trapcode Particular 3 from redgiant.com. Particular is kind of the Photoshop of particle generation, both in its power and ubiquity and use, I suppose. And it gives you a lot of control and just tons of things you can do with it. It is $399, so I hope you really like particles if you're willing to drop $400 on it. I use it all the time. It works really great, and there's tons of fun things you can do with it, so definitely check that out. There's a free trial you can download. Another one, which is slightly cheaper at $250, is Stardust from aescripts.com. This one is kind of a newcomer and takes a more modular approach to particle generation, but I would say it's almost on par with Particular. So if you're looking for more of an entry point into particle generation, Stardust might be the way to go. I use both of them and they both work great, so check out both of them. You can also get a free trial of this one as well. But let's get into the tutorial. I was kind of thinking that this would be a really great like Instagram story background, so I'm just going to kind of build this with that in mind. So I'm going to start with a new composition at 1080 by 1920, and I'm just going to call it liquidy. And I'm going to make it 24 frames a second. I'm also going to make it 30 seconds long. I know Instagram stories are only 15 seconds long, but I also want to make this be able to loop for different purposes as well, and it gives me the chance to show you how to make particles loop inside of After Effects. So added bonus, who could disagree with that? Alright, so let's hit OK. I'm going to start just by drawing a background here, just a shape layer, and I'll just call it background, lock it off, and move on. So to create our particles, we need to start with a new solid. I'll just call this particles, and then make sure it's the comp size, hit OK. Alright, then you want to go to Effect, Simulation, and then CC Particle World. Alright, it gives you a lot of interface stuff that can kind of get in the way, so I usually like to get rid of that. So I'm just going to deselect all of this interface stuff here. Alright. So if you're new to particle systems, they usually tend to start from basically nothing and then get to full blast, and you go from there. So if you're on your first frame and you don't see anything, just scrub forward in time and you might start seeing some particles. And so to start with, there are way too many particles here for my taste, and that's controlled by the birth rate. Particle World's way of telling you, or the interface for this can be a little wonky because 2 doesn't really tell me anything. With something like Particular, for example, it tells me how many particles per second, but 2 doesn't really mean anything. But I did do some trial and error, and something like 0.05 is going to work for what I want. So I'm just going to do 0.05, and I think we'll be good. Longevity is basically how long the particles stay in existence, and I'm going to do 15 for that so we can get that nice seamless loop going on. Okay. And so I do want them to, right now the reason they're falling is because of this gravity setting under physics, and I do want gravity, but I want it to be more anti-gravity. So I'm going to go minus, say, like 40, and this velocity is kind of why they're all going all over the place. So I'm just going to put this down to 0, and now I'm just going to have a steady stream shooting straight up. Alright, so for my loop, I don't want to do any like opacity or size changes because it's going to mess up my effect. And so I'm going to go to Producer and have the start point where the particles are basically born, and put this below the bottom of the frame a good ways, maybe something like that. And I think that'll work pretty well. Okay, so I think we're on the right track. I'm going to go into particle now to kind of make my particles look better. And for now, I'm going to go with bubble just so I can see what I'm doing. And I need them to be a lot bigger, so I'm going to do something like 2.5 and 2.5. Again, this isn't the most helpful way of telling me this because it doesn't tell me how big they are in pixels, but you work with what you got, I guess. Alright, and I do want a little bit of size variation, but not a whole lot, maybe something like that, and I want my max opacity to be 100. There's also an opacity map, which is basically telling it to go from 0 to 100% opacity, and then 100% opacity to 0 opacity. I just want this to be full on all the time, so 100% all the time, so I'm just going to draw that in like that. Okay, and now I need to just set this up a little bit more, so I'm going to go to Producer, and for radius X, so from left to right, I want it to be a lot bigger, something like that maybe will work. I can maybe change the radius Y a little bit. And then for Z, I do want more Z space, just so that as they're floating up, they have some variation in how fast they go. And you may have seen a problem we had right there where a couple of those just kind of popped into existence, which I don't want, so I'm just going to put the position Y down further, and I think that will probably be okay. And we'll clean that up a little bit later. Alright, so now I want to start thinking about how to make this loop. I'm going to go to 15 seconds in and set a marker here. This is basically going to be a guide for my loop point. Now I'm going to take this all the way to the beginning and make sure it's just that marker's on the first frame like so, and then extend this all the way to the end, like that. Alright, and then I'm going to set a keyframe here for that birth rate, and I want to make sure that this is a hold keyframe, and a hold keyframe basically says hold this value until the next keyframe, basically. So I'm going to go to 15 seconds in, put this down to 0, and now, so they should start, that's what I want. It might be a little fast, but we can adjust that a little bit later. And then it comes to 15, now it stops generating particles, so all the ones that have been generated are all that's left, and then at the end, there's nothing more. Okay. So I might need more Y radius, maybe some more. I might actually need a few more particles. Let's try 0.08. Let's see if that works any better. Alright, we'll keep playing with this, but I think this will probably work for now. I think I want my radius to be a little bit wider, just because I want the particles to move in and out of each other and not just be so clumped together. But I think we're kind of on the right track. I might bring the position Y up a little bit. And I just want to scrub through to make sure that none of them pop in and out of existence. That one did. So I might just need to reduce the Y radius a bit. And then push the position Y down just a little bit. I think something like that will probably be okay. Okay, so now I just want to duplicate this and bring this all the way to the end and make sure it goes one frame past my last frame marker so that we get the seamless loop. And let's see what that looks like. Make sure it loops seamlessly. Yeah, I think that works pretty well. If I had more time, I'd probably go back in and play with this a little bit more, but I think this will work for right now. Okay, one last thing I want to do is maybe give it a little more movement. So if I go to physics, instead of explosive, I might change this to like twirl. And now my particles, I need to give it a little bit of velocity. My particles should kind of have a little bit of movement. Maybe a little bit more velocity. There we go. That'll probably, that might be a little too much. Let's just split the difference. Make sure there's no popping in of existence, and I think that will probably work. Okay, cool. And let's just play with this just to see what happens. Okay, I think that'll be nice. Okay, And the nice thing is once you've already kind of set this up for this loop point, if you do make changes to your initial one, you can just duplicate it, make sure it lines up right there, and then just delete the former one and your loop should be good to go. And so I think we're good with the particles. I guess there is one more thing I want to do, in that I don't want these to have hard edges. I want them to be, more feathered. So instead of bubble, I'm going to go to faded sphere, and we'll get that. And then I'm just going to duplicate this and do that same thing again, just like that. And we should be good to go. Okay, now I need to pre-comp these. So I'm just going to select both of them and say pre-compose. I'll call this liquid particles 1. And then you want to make sure you move all attributes into new composition, but you don't want to adjust the duration to the time span. So you basically, without that selected, it's going to make it the entire length of this comp, which is what I want. Hit OK. Okay. Cool. Now let's make these into kind of liquidy particles. So the first thing I want to do is add even more blur to this, which might, there's already a lot, but it's going to help us get that viscosity look. So I'm going to do Gaussian blur, repeat edge pixels, and just kind of crank it up quite a bit. Maybe something like that. I'm going to go back and see what I did for my last one. 103, so maybe I need to bring it down just a little bit. Okay. And then we're going to be using an effect called Simple Choker. So if you go to Effects and Presets, and you can just, spinning beach ball. Simple Choker, just type in simple and you can find Simple Choker. You can also get it from Effect, let me get out of there a second. Effect, Matte, Simple Choker. And then if you pull the final output all the way down, you can see it's given us exactly what we want. And we now have that viscosity going on, and it's pretty nice look. And so you can kind of see that it's doing that. And I might need to go back in and make my particles a little bit bigger. So let me do that real quick. So that was under particle, and I might just do 3 and 3. Maybe even 4. One thing to keep in mind is that this effect is I guess really affecting things, and so what you see in here is not necessarily precisely what you're going to get inside of your main comp once you put that Simple Choker on. So just keep that in mind. I think that'll work pretty well. You know what? I might even make these just a tad bit bigger at 5 and 5. Okay, let's try that. Then duplicate, pull this over, delete, and we're good to go. Okay. Yeah, that works a little bit better. Cool. So we have that nice viscous look. They flow in and out of each other, and it's just pretty cool. Okay. So one problem that we're running into right now is that, you can see we have it not quite, kind of almost fades into field there at the edges. And so we want to kind of get rid of that. And there's no real good way to fix it beyond just scaling this up a little bit. And so it's kind of a pretty simple fix. And, just like that. Those particles might be a little bit too close to each other. But you can see how we've set this up. It's pretty easy just to, modify things. And if you don't like the look you have, you can just go back in and change it pretty quickly and just experiment until you get what you want. All right, I think I like that a little bit better. I think maybe my particles are just a bit too big. Let's go back to 4 and 4. Let's see what that looks like. And you know what? 5 and 5 was better. So we'll go with that. And you can always go in and play with it later if you want to. Okay, yeah, that looks nice. Okay, so the last thing we want to do to get this just looking really nice is to add that kind of gradient that we had in the first one. There's a few different ways you can go about this, but in my experiments with this, like I initially tried to add just like a gradient layer style. The problem with doing that is the gradient layer style is dependent on what's actually in the scene at one time, so it's going to be changing as different particles coming and stuff like that. However, if you use a different effect, say go to generate 4-color gradient, this is actually based on the frame size, and so this, or the actual size of the layer, I should say. And so it's not going to change as the particles change, and you can see, once it kind of leaves that purple spot, that purple spot kind of stays there. There's kind of that imaginary line where it goes from purple to green. But we don't want those colors because they look terrible. And I don't know why it defaults to these. So let's do something like a nice kind of vibrant blue up here. Maybe make it the same color. Yeah, that's actually kind of cool down there. But so let's maybe just make this blue that pink. And that's kind of nice. I like that. And so basically the colors are changing as they rise. And so I think that's kind of fun. This is a pretty processor intensive way of doing things, so you might need to drop your resolution down just to kind of see what it looks like. As you do, you'll get these kind of jaggedy edges, but as you can see, once you go up to full, it'll kind of fix them, especially if you put it to 16-bit, it'll clean everything up. So make sure to do that when you're ready to export. And so I think that's looking pretty nice. Yeah, that might be too much of a gradient change, so I might just do something like a kind of maybe vibrant green like that. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that's kind of nice. Yeah, that's cool. All right, and then the last thing I might want to do is just add some text in there. So there's a fun font called Anaheim Gothic, which you can get, I believe, from Creative Market. So I'm just going to put in liquid particles. I keep hitting V. There we go. I'll just make this white. I could add a gradient too if I wanted to, but just put that there in the center. Maybe align it, and it's just the leading or the letting, however you want to say it. And I think we got a fun little effect here. And so we got that nice viscosity going on, and yeah, it just kind of looks really cool. And you can play around with the particles to get different looks and things like that. So pretty easy to do this. Just takes a little bit of know-how, and now you know how. So go out there, make some great looking liquid particles, and I will talk to you later.